My life in Maple Creek, Ohio, was always a tapestry woven with the vibrant threads of family. I'm Meredith Stone, 54 years old, and my world revolved around my husband, David, and our wonderful son, Ethan. David and I built a comfortable, quiet life here, a warm home filled with laughter and the comforting aroma of my homemade apple pie. I was the one who always organized the family gatherings, the keeper of traditions, the person who made sure everyone felt connected, especially David's sweet mother, Eleanor. Eleanor, at 84, was the matriarch, a gentle soul with a heart as big as Lake Erie, and her wisdom was the glue that held us all together. Our family, a beautiful mess of cousins, aunts, and uncles, used to gather for every holiday, birthdays, and just because, filling our lives with joyous chaos. But then, about 2 years ago, a storm cloud appeared on our horizon, and her name was Brenda. Brenda, David's sister and my sister-in-law, was always a bit of a force, strong-willed and always needing to be in control. We always tolerated her quirks, chalking it up to her unique personality, but something shifted. Slowly, subtly at first, then with increasing intensity, Brenda started to pull away, and worse, she started pulling others with her. It began with small slights, then outright accusations towards David and his other brother, Robert. Then she went for Eleanor, David's mother, cutting her off, claiming she was manipulative, old-fashioned, impossible to deal with. It was absurd. Eleanor was the furthest thing from that. Brenda even forbid her own 4 adult children and their spouses and children from having any contact with Eleanor or the rest of us, their own flesh and blood. It was like watching a perfectly good quilt unravel, thread by painful thread. We were all left reeling, confused, heartbroken. What was her motive? We suspected money, a deep-seated greed that had festered, but sometimes I wondered if it was something darker, some hidden illness, a brain tumor making her act so monstrously. The problem I had to solve, the deep aching void in my heart, was how to mend a family torn apart by one woman's venom, how to bring back the peace and connection that Brenda had so cruelly stolen from us all, especially from Eleanor, who was visibly wilting under the strain. David and I tried everything. We called Brenda, pleading for understanding, offering to talk things through to mediate any perceived grievances. We sent olive branches, handwritten letters, even tried to arrange a neutral meeting. But Brenda was a brick wall, impenetrable and unyielding. Each attempt was met with silence, or worse, a furious, venomous voicemail filled with new accusations, new reasons why we were all terrible people. We tried to reach out to her children, our nieces and nephews, explaining how much their grandmother missed them, how much we all missed them. We shared old photos, hoping to spark a memory of happier times. But Brenda had them under her thumb, controlling their phones, monitoring their social media, weaving a narrative of betrayal and victimhood that painted us all as villains. Some of the kids seemed hesitant, a flicker of doubt in their eyes, but Brenda's influence was too strong. They slowly, painfully stopped responding. Our efforts to bridge the gap only seemed to widen the chasm. Holidays became somber affairs. Christmas was no longer a bustling, joyous gathering, but a quiet, melancholy meal with just David, Ethan, and Eleanor. The empty chairs around the table echoed the missing laughter, the absent chatter. Eleanor, once so vibrant and full of life, began to look frail, her eyes holding a deep sadness that twisted my stomach into knots. She stopped telling her usual lively stories, her smile became a rare, fragile thing. Then the worst happened. Eleanor fell ill. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic collapse, but a slow, quiet fading. The doctors said it was pneumonia, but I knew deep down it was more than that. It was a broken heart, a spirit dimmed by the loss of her family, the absence of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. David and I spent every day by her bedside, holding her hand, trying to fill the void. One afternoon, as the setting sun cast long shadows across her hospital room, Eleanor squeezed my hand, her voice a whisper. "Meredith," she rasped, "I've tried to make things right, tried to share what little I have fairly so there are no more arguments." She spoke of her small inheritance, money she had saved over a lifetime, and how she was distributing it to each family unit. "I've written checks, Meredith, for everyone, David and you, Robert and his family, and even Brenda and hers. I want no one to feel forgotten, even if they choose to forget me." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a heartbreaking blend of sorrow and resolve. "It's all divided per person, you see. Each child, grandchild, and spouse in a family unit gets an equal share of that family's lump sum. That's the fairest way," I thought. Hearing her speak of this, her voice weak, her heart heavy, made me feel utterly defeated. Here she was trying to make peace even with the one who had caused her so much pain. It felt like another failure. Brenda's venom had not only destroyed our present but now threatened to sour even Eleanor's final acts of generosity. I just sat there holding Eleanor's hand, feeling the crushing weight of all that was lost. Eleanor, bless her resilient spirit, rallied a bit. She came home weaker but determined to see her plans through. She sent out the checks. David and I received ours in the mail a few days later. It was a substantial amount, a testament to Eleanor's careful planning and generosity. David's brother Robert and his family, who had 3 children and 1 grandchild, also received their share. And then there was Brenda. Brenda, with her 4 adult children, 3 grandchildren, and 2 spouses in the mix. She had amassed a small army, a veritable brood, which she often boasted about. The day the checks went out, I could practically feel the tension in the air, a silent expectation of Brenda's next explosion. But for a day or two there was nothing. Then David got a call from Robert. Robert sounded bewildered and a little amused. He had just spoken to Brenda. It turns out Eleanor had divided her inheritance into 3 equal lump sums, one for each of her children's family units. Then each lump sum was to be divided equally among every single person in that specific family unit, including spouses and grandchildren. David, Ethan, and I were a family unit of 3. Robert's family unit had Robert, his wife, 3 children, and 1 grandchild, making them a unit of 6. Brenda, with her husband, 4 adult children, 3 grandchildren, and 2 spouses for her adult children, comprised a sprawling unit of 11 people. The irony was so sharp, so poetic, it almost took my breath away. Brenda, who prided herself on her large family, on her fertility, on her blood family purity, would receive a lump sum that, when divided by 11, meant each individual in her family received a fraction of what David, Ethan, and I each received from our smaller family's share. David and I, just 3 of us, ended up receiving almost 4 times more per person than anyone in Brenda's sprawling brood. Robert described Brenda's reaction. Initially, a smug certainty that she would get the most because she had the most children, the biggest family. Then confusion as she looked at the numbers, her brow furrowed. And finally, the dawning realization, the furious recalculation, the dawning horror that she, Brenda, the one who had so proudly proclaimed her family's size and importance, the one who had so ruthlessly cut off her mother, was getting the smallest individual share of the inheritance. Her pride, her greed, her carefully constructed narrative of victimhood all came crashing down with a few simple numbers. Robert said she exploded, a volcanic eruption of accusations, yelling about how Eleanor had always favored David, how this was a deliberate slight, how it was unfair. But it wasn't unfair. It was simply Eleanor's way of distributing her money equally per person within each branch, and Brenda's own choices, her own large family, had led to this outcome. Her power over us, over the family narrative, shattered into a million pieces. She couldn't accuse us of manipulation because Eleanor's will was clear and her distribution method was consistent for all. Brenda's fury eventually died down, not because she understood, but because she had nowhere else to direct it. She stewed in her own bitter juices, isolated by her own choices, now also financially diminished by her large family unit. The checks didn't magically heal our shattered family. Eleanor remained frail, and the holidays were still quieter than before, but a different kind of peace settled upon us. David and I found a quiet satisfaction not in Brenda's suffering but in the poetic justice of the situation. Eleanor, though still heartbroken over the overall family division, found a small measure of peace in knowing she had, in her own gentle way, ensured that fairness in her definition prevailed. We continued to visit Eleanor, cherishing every moment knowing that her love was the real inheritance. Then, about 6 months later, an unexpected email arrived. It was from Brenda's eldest daughter, Sarah, who had always seemed the most conflicted about the family drama. The subject line simply read, "Grandma Eleanor." The email was short, hesitant, but heartfelt. Sarah apologized for the silence, confessed she missed Eleanor, and asked if it would be possible to visit, just her alone, without her mother knowing. A small, tentative seed of hope, a tiny crack in the wall Brenda had built, appeared. It wasn't a grand reunion, but it was a beginning. And it was all the validation I needed, proof that sometimes, even when you lose everything, the truth and a bit of accidental justice can find its way home.